All right, hey everybody, welcome to Problematic White Guy. Hope everyone is awesome as always. This was kind of an impromptu thing. I'm running a little bit erratic on my tech, but I figured, F it, let's just start. Let's do it live. Doing it live, right? All right, so today's been an interesting, busy day on YouTube. I was going to have links down in the description. I'll have to edit those in later. Had a little slight tech issue right before I started. But it's getting late, burning midnight, and I figure, F it, let's just get this thing on with. So, we are going to be talking tonight about what's going on with the current GamerGate 2 information that's starting to come to bear. And it's important to kind of put our focus on what we actually need to be looking at, because if we spend our time just trying to pin this all on Kim Belair, who is completely up her ass and around the corner on certain issues, most definitely. And Sweet Baby Inc. is a terrible institution that is causing a lot of unnecessary wokeness and diversity poison in the industry. Ultimately, they are not the cause of these things. They are merely a symptom of the much larger rot that is in the industry, as it were. And it comes through in a lot of different ways, directly and indirectly. It has a lot to do with, venture capital money, outsourcing. A lot of these practices actually began, over the course of the last 20 years. I myself, graduated from Savannah College of Art and Design back in 2009, and when I was going through the game development program, I actually kind of got a whiff of this before it even got out of the oven, so to speak. And I was calling it out then when we would be in class. And it was one of those things where you just try to make sure that everybody has their artistic integrity at play. But when we were going to SCAD, our head of our department, she wanted us all to focus on branding and basically just teaching us how to get into the industry, basically making an indoctrination society. So this is something that's pervasive and goes all the way back to, well beyond what anybody can really even point to anymore, because this all evolved out of HR. And when you're talking about Sweet Baby Inc. specifically, it's a group that was spun off from the HR department of Ubisoft. And in many ways, this was done to be an deflection point so that it can offload heat from Ubisoft, because if they outsource these things, then you can't directly hold them responsible if something, goes amiss. And that's kind of the idea behind a lot of this stuff is, just keeping it on the down low and trying to keep the points of distraction as the games themselves, because games come out all the time. And there'll always be a new game to be up in arms about, or to, kind of wonder, where is this coming from? Why is this so, constant? Why does every game that come out turn into a big woke pile of trash? And ultimately, it's because that's the way that the industry has been built up and built out. As a way to, make itself more corporatized and in line with all these various, monetary schemes that drive all kind of corporate entities these days. So, that's the thing that we have to remember to focus on, is that when it comes to principles of magic, and I'm going to kind of be a little bit strange. I'm going to talk allegorically about some of this stuff, because to me it almost makes more sense to relate it to fiction, because there's more honesty in fiction than there is truth in the news. And so, when I look at this, I see Lord of the Rings. And by that I mean, you look at a company like Sweet Baby Inc. and Kim Belair and even all the other little small players that are caught up through GamerGate all the way up until now. we basically have gaming industry herpes, and it's going to flare up every few years if we don't take the time to actually deal with it for what it is. And that's this entire system of, seduction. And seduction in and of itself, most people think seduction is, a woman in a red dress trying to allure you. And that's what the seducer wants you to think when it applies to magic. Now, seduction does mean that, in relationships and this and that. But when you're talking about the principles of magic, it's like the prestige, or, again with Lord of the Rings, like, to seduce someone, you have to have them more caught up in other things that are going on around them than what you're doing as the person who's casting your spell and enchanting them with your magic. Now, much like Lord of the Rings, there is two directions, or not necessarily two directions, but two paths that you can travel upon when it applies to magic, at least from my perspective, and this is just my opinion, but I believe that Gandalf is a wizard, and Saruman, his friend, is a sorcerer. He used to be a wizard, but he was seduced by the darkness that is Sauron. And in that seduction, he, began to cling to the thing that gave him power. And that's what sorcery is ultimately, is, trying to make sure that you're the one who has control and everyone is beholden to you. And so I'm just telling Nerd Wars that I'm going live right now, because I promised him that I would let him know when I did tonight. So he might pop into the chat. He might be the only one in the chat. But I wanted to just throw this out there and actually, just start making a video and talking kind of where we are in the whole investigation that's currently going on. I've got a larger project that I'm working on that will come out shortly. Well, not necessarily shortly, in a matter of weeks, as quickly as I can put it together and assemble it. But right now I'm doing a lot of editing. But in the meantime, I at least wanted to kind of touch base because, like I say, a lot of initial focus was being put on Sweet Baby Inc., obviously, because they seem to be one of the most odious offenders. They're Sweet Baby Stink, right? And so if we just take the time to put all the focus on them, then this thing is going to fizzle out, and it will only be a moment. And the reason why I bring that up is because the lead of their group, Kim Belair, if we go here and look at some information that is on the internet at gameindustry.biz, she's written a few articles there. And one of the articles she wrote is actually, I got the wrong article up here. Let me fix that really quick. We're doing it live, right? All right, so she has this one article that's actually pertaining to GamerGate the first time around, right? And so, like, in here she talks about a moment, and if you only focus on the moment, then all these dark entities are going to come back. And, I'll be honest, like, if Kim was any more of a projection artist, we'd be having this conversation inside of a movie theater. Because, this woman cannot see past the delusion of her own haze, right? And so everything that she sees is pockmarked with her own weird, twisted ideology. But as I was saying, to get back to Lord of the Rings analogy, she's much more like, a worm tongue, whispering terrible things in someone's ear and kind of coaxing them to go down the darker path. Because, magic, again, is one of those things that does exist as either sorcery or wizardry. Now, I myself am more interested in being a sorcerer, or not a sorcerer, sorry, in dealing with the sorcerers by being a wizard. Because if we're a wizard, we can be like Gandalf. We share our wisdom, we pass it along to everybody. And I'm just getting a message from Nerd Wars in the chat. So, yeah, I know. Like, all of a sudden, it's an hour later than I expected. I'm going to go ahead and take this screen off, and we should see... we should see this guy. All right. So, as I was saying, when it comes to Lord of the Rings, you've got your wizardry in Gandalf, and you got your sorcery in Saruman. And because that sorcery is a way to cast magic and make people beholden to you, that's what our industry has become. Now, if we're going to actually cut this thing out, the cancer that it is, then we have to replace it with, artistic integrity and, actually be in a more free market kind of system to where we can tell legitimate stories and not just have it be about all this box checking bullshit that they may try to lie and deny to in a variety of ways. But again, the conversation we were having earlier today on Nerd Wars live stream, and then also later on Hypnotics, which I've got links to them that I'm going to point out. They were supposed to be down in the description. I'll put them in later. But if you want to get really good in-depth information, those are two good areas to start in terms of getting quality information from people that are actually doing good work as it applies to all of this. Nerd Wars himself actually is the person who broke the ground on, kind of making this a larger concern being exposed than just, oh, Sweet Baby Ink sucks. And to his credit, he just wanted to make fun of the thing. But it was an interesting kind of situation last week. I've been kind of talking to him on and off through his chat for the last couple of months. And since I went to school for game design, I know a lot of people in the game industry at this point. Most of them have kind of blacklisted me and, put me in a memory hole over the course of the last 10 years for one reason or another, because I don't go along with this ideological bullshit that they are so caught up in. And, as Nerd Wars say, he just wanted to make fun of some pronoun settlers. And, you go to their websites, and he's got the information on his site. So like I say, if you want really good in-depth information at the moment, that's where to go right now. With the way that the industry is built out and built up, you don't have to have some ultimate grand conspiracy being centralized in one aspect of how this all plays out. And that's why it's important to not put all of our focus on Sweet Baby Ink as being the be-all end-all of this situation, because much like in Kim's silly article here, where she's talking about predators in the game industry, that's what we'll end up with, is we'll only be able to take care of the situation for a mere moment. We'll think everything's all good, and then another 5-10 years, our herpes will flare up again, and we'll be right back here with GamerGate 3. And if you ask me, I think we'd all like to avoid that, because ultimately, this is something that shouldn't have even begun in the first place. But to go and say that it's all the outsourcing or, a specific, entity within that framework, that's like trying to blame an entire movie production on a bad actor. Now, a bad actor may, bring a movie down completely and halt everything and call attention to, how terrible they are. But there's producers involved. There's directors involved. There's, all this stuff that puts the actor on the stage so that you focus on what's going on in front of you and not the seduction that put that person there. So the actor is the woman in the red dress, to get back to my magic analogy. And so what we need to do is we need to find the sorcerers that are casting this dark magic and enchanting everybody with, lies and deceit. And if we can do that, and we can actually make this a thing that's about, artistic integrity and just telling good stories, then we can be wizards. Then we can actually, bring something positive into the world. But for that to happen, we first have to burn the witch. And we have to end this dark plague that's, undermining us all. And, Nerd Wars saying, Kotaku, it's not going to be here after we're said and done with. That is the witch. That is one of the witches. We have an entire coven of witches that we have to hunt down and take care of, not to sound like, like I'm promoting violence or anything. This is all figuratively speaking. We're going to disrupt their avenues of discourse and replace them. Because much like they would like to replace us, the way to fight fire is with fire. And the best way to fight sorcery is with wizardry, because you need to have some level of magic on your side if you're going up against this thing. that is all about deceptive means and, trying to do things through subterfuge. So, that's kind of where I entered into this thing in a very interesting way, because like I said, I've been talking to Nerd Wars off and on through the chat. And so, a couple of weeks back, when we were talking, I had this exchange that I wanted to bring to his attention after I had, gotten this Facebook posting during the weekend. And this came from one of the people I know in the industry, and they were describing the whole thing as kind of being like the Red Wedding from Game of Thrones, and I didn't really jive with that all that well. And so, I told them my opinion on it, and I just basically said, well, maybe if the gaming industry stopped taking their directives from HR, marketing, and focus group consulting groups like Sweet Baby Inc., all this could have been avoided. But just being honest about the current state of the situation, selling out to venture capitalist groups to undermine legitimate creativity was always a fool's gambit that could only end in tears. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. And then I have a meme image from Starship Troopers, which, is the spiritual predecessor to Helldivers, which I should be picking up soon to do some live streaming when we can actually kind of have some fun outside of this, medical challenge that we're dealing with, trying to get rid of our gaming herpes. We're effectively the Valtrex here, but I'm not big into pharmaceuticals. He said he's starting to see why I'm blacklisted. Yeah. I suppose, I can be a little bit, brash and kind of rough around the edges, but, I think that's kind of one of the things that we've lost in all of this is, the gray beiging of mass media. That's part of this whole censorship culture. And that's what a lot of this stuff really ultimately is about. I mean, this is a means to an end. If we can get people to expect less, pay more, not own anything, and be beholden to live service model games, well then ultimately they're going to be able to affect the way that people perceive and think. And if you don't even know that you're, being misled, then you'll never even think outside of those paradigms. And so that's part of the important part in all of this, is to maintain our freedom of expression. Because I truly believe that an honest threat is still far more polite in any way, shape, or form than a disingenuous promise, even if it's spoken kindly and politely. And, that's one of the things we have let kind of slide in the course of the last 20 plus years since, the events of, September 11th and the way that the world just kind of changed under this security state. And along with all this technology, things become very easy to lock down and to kind of work as control gates. And so to undo a lot of that, we are going to have to take time and consideration and be very discerning. Because if we just start assuming that we know where the problem is and we're just going to take care of that quick problem, well, then we're going to end up with a lot of half measures that's just going to Swiss cheese our understanding of what's even going on, which is what Nerd Wars was getting into earlier today on his live stream, which again will be linked down in the description after this. But if you want to pull up another window and go pull up his channel, I definitely recommend you should like and subscribe. He's got great information, and along with the Friday Nights Tight crew, he's definitely inspired me to actually make this more of a thing. And going forward, my focus is going to be on this. Also, currently, Geeks and Gamers is looking to get people to do some urinalism and, piss in the face of these people that will, gladly just shit down our throats with all of this terrible, rot. Let me check. You're saying, okay, yeah, it's still the same thing. But, that's kind of the thing is, if we allow these people to have the means of production, as it were, which is the post from Twitter that Nerd Wars was talking about, seizing the means of productions. This is very much a globalist, collectivist, authoritarian threat that, in many ways, is just fancy speak for Marxism. Like, this is all, you'll own nothing, you'll be happy. This is all that stuff. But this is a means to an end by getting us to be more divisive and get caught up in our, polarized kind of echo chambers. Now, I'm kind of lucky in the sense that I've never really fit in with either extreme. And so, I'll get people on one side thinking I'm one thing, I'll get people on the other side thinking I'm the other, and ultimately I'd rather just stand outside the fire and watch it all burn down. Because to get caught up in that is a way to, it's like the Star-Bellied Sneetches. If we all just kind of like going at it the same way, where we're just trying to burn the witch and act like that's it and there's no more dark magic because we took care of one witch, that doesn't do anything for anybody, other than for your immediate kind of gratitude of, a self-fulfilling kind of sense of, I did this. And if you do that, then we are in many ways just going to end up being, exactly like Kim Belair and her ilk and the people at Sweet Baby Inc. But, like we have found in the course of time since we started this investigation, haphazardly as it was, because like Nerd Wars says, he was just trying to make fun of people that, take themselves way too seriously. And so that's what I mean by we can't allow ourselves to become the thing that we're trying to root out and rail against, because ultimately, even these silly people that are doing this have been exploited by a system that has churned them out and indoctrinated them to be the useful idiots of our own destruction. And so I'm not going to say that, they can even necessarily be redeemed, but if it's ever to happen, it will only be in the sense that they will actually come to terms with what they do and how they got to where they are, and they would ultimately have to make a choice and start changing their ways and abiding by doing stuff in a more, on the level kind of method. I don't think that that's really kind of possible with a lot of these people, and that's why it's so important for us to start making a parallel economy in some ways and decentralized from all this mainstream modernity that's being forced on to us in all these various avenues. Now, earlier today in the chats, I was mentioning how, it's kind of like when you think of the movie pop culture and comic book stuff, that's the Fellowship. That's the FNT crew, right? But Gary, even though, he is a master gamer, he's so committed on what he's doing, he can't take the time to necessarily focus on this one. And so, rather than having Gandalf, you got Radagast. I'm a younger wizard. I'm a little bit more bumbly and misguided, and definitely, I make mistakes here and there all the time. But my intention has always been to have artistic integrity be at the forefront of all of this. And ultimately, that's what I want for any of this, is to inspire people to go on and actually tell those stories that have context. And whatever that context is, that's the stuff you put into it. If we allow the system to undermine it by saying, oh, it's from this top-down directive, you're going to go and put all this stuff in there, and anything that you can't get through on directives will just come through in exposition. And that ends up making all games, regardless what they look like, very much the same. And so, not saying that it has to be this way forever, but currently, I don't really look forward to any AAA game titles myself. And now that the Corpo Speak has done what it normally does, they're calling Quadruple A, as though that's somehow going to make it better because it has a new branding label on it. And that's the thing is, if you say order some food at a restaurant and it's just fast food, right? And so you go and you get your burger and you bite into it and it's like not good. Or actually, even before you bite into it, you notice they made it wrong. And so you go and you take it back up and you're like, hey, can you fix this, remake it? And gladly, we'll do that right for you right now. And so they just go in the back, take it out, take off whatever the offending thing was, put it in a new wrapper and hand it right back to you. And so and who knows, they might spit in it at that point in time too, just because they have whatever going on. And so that's part of the reason why, and this is completely off the topic, I do a lot of my own, cooking and eat whole food, because I think that that's also another part of this larger global conspiracy of sorts And because, the way that you feed yourself, be it physically, emotionally, mentally, creatively, spiritually, these are the avenues that are being corrupted. And that's what Nerd Wars was trying to get into today on the stream that they had, and also as part of the stream that was going on Hypnotic's channel. Because if we just take this as, oh, we got to get that witch, but not the actual coven that she's a part of, well, then she's just going to, the coven's going to put another witch out, and we'll focus on that, rather rinse, repeat. And I don't want that. I'm tired of dealing with this as though it's something that can just be taken care of. So, just instantly. It took a lot of time for them to build up this industry in the way that they have. And once they had everything in place, they didn't build this system to not use it. And so they built the subterfuge and the compartmentalization into it to make it confusing, to make it hard to understand and, see where the corruption is. And so that's why it's so important, the work that we're doing now, doing more research into this and finding more people that are involved with it than just the silliness that is these people at Sweet Baby Inc. We have to take the time to actually understand that if we're going to get beyond a world where we're beholden to their dark magic, we have to break the spell entirely, and we have to have people being able to call out the dark magicians for the magicians that they are. And like I say, it's so important that we don't, think that we fix this and then as time goes by to also not fall into those same traps, because the seducers will come. And that's why we are dealing right now with the exact same people who were involved with the original GamerGate, now here in GamerGate 2. And, it's going to just be constantly there, and it'll be it's like having static in your frequency. Like you're tuned in and you're getting most of what you want, but there's just like this little extra thing that's throwing it off, and you're not getting the fidelity that you would rather enjoy to have. And so, you've got all this chatter, and that chatter is like the back channels that they use, the whisper networks, the this and that, the way that they have, blacklisted people such as myself from the game industry because I may say things a little bit harshly from time to time. But, sometimes people need to be kind of shocked to light so that, you can actually kind of get them to, be broken from the spell or the, as woke as we call these things. A lot of people are hypnotized and sleepwalking through the situation because they've grown up inside of it. And they don't see it for anything other than, the haze of their ideology reinforcing everything they do as being somehow this great thing. And, for myself, before kind of getting back into my creative end of things, I spent 10 years living on the West Coast, working in a holistic naturopathic doctor's office. And so it's part of the reason why I'm all about, having good, clean foods and not allowing the things that would otherwise go into our diet affecting me. Because I know ultimately at the end of the day, the buyer beware. And if you just go and get these things that are top-down driven sources of profiteering, then ultimately that's kind of the thing that sets the corruption in play. Because, if your intent is to make a lot of profit by any means necessary, well, then you start looking for ways that you can cut things out, put less money out and get more money in. And so the sad thing is that a lot of this wokeification of the game industry has really been leading up to where we are now, where people are losing their jobs to robots, because a robot you pay for once, and other than electricity, you really don't have to pay for it again. And so they can bring the cost of doing business down And as long as everybody buys into the concept that these things are somehow better quality than stuff that you can get from small level independent developers or people that are only able to do like, like AA titles or whatever you want to call it, but it's coming from a labor of love and people who want to put their best foot forward and are actually letting their artistic integrity speak through their work. But if you go and you have like, some back-end channel that is concerned about, dollars and cents, the way that the marketing is driven, all these symptoms to the cause, you're never going to get rid of your cancer if you only focus on cutting out the polyps and the tumors. You have to change your diet. You have to correct the thing that caused the cancer to take hold and become, so pervasive and just blown up throughout your entire body. I would have said metastasize, but it was a big issue on Hypnotic's video tonight, so I won't. And I'll just say that, if like you don't want the cancer going everywhere throughout your body and getting riddled with it to the point that it just kills everything, you have to take some very proactive, course work on your end to avoid the things that would otherwise lead you to a situation where you're going to have to deal with this tumorous rot. And that's why I say, we need to kind of focus right now on just entertaining each other, celebrating the games that come out that are actually legitimate and good and worth our time to invest and be interested in. So, I keep hearing great things about Helldivers too. And so, like, people will go and they'll say, oh, well, that game glorifies fascism. And, I hate to break anybody's heart, but right now we live in a very globalist, authoritarian-driven society. And one extreme end will kind of censor you with brutality, and the other one will brutalize you into censorship. And you pick out which of those they are. It's not for me to decide on how you look at it. But there is a lot of work within a uniparty-driven system that is about setting up, international corporations that aren't beholden to any one nation state. And so they become their own nation states, and that's how we end up with, corrupt forms of governance that make this whole thing even come into play. Because you've got, say, our government. It is a wealth consolidation scheme anymore. We use a fraud system, and by that I mean a Federal Reserve actuary usury denomination note system. So our money's not based on anything. It is, in a sense, monopoly money. And the more they print of it, the more things cost because the more they debase the economy. And when we were in lockdown for a number of years and all the small businesses got folded in, well, now we're beholden to the sorcery that is their profiteering because we can't compete on a level playing field. And so that's what we need to do right now is let them do their thing as well as they can, but if we don't buy into it, then they lose power. And ultimately, they will either change their ways or they'll go away because they can't sustain themselves without us, the people that actually care about these things. All the people who showed up that are just scene chasers and here on the, boundary edge of the periphery of, oh, I play video games. Oh, really? What do you play? Oh, I play Candy Crush. Not to say that I have never really played Candy Crush. I'm just picking a mobile game at large, And yes, you can go and say that it is one, avenue or another, but the entire traffic of the way that this is done has got everything, in a jam and, just has everything stalled out. And so if we want the pathways of communication to flow openly and freely, we're going to have to take the time to actually, fix the things that are going on, or we move away from those areas where people are all congested and can't get past where they're at, in their gridlocked system. And so we, I myself, like I said, used to live on the West Coast. Now I'm in the Midwest again. I'm in a fairly small town, not much going on here, but, because there's not much going on here, I can actually just kind of focus on the things I'm doing. And ultimately, I just want to have a good garden. and maybe have like, a business that's built around clean foods. But that's like another story for another day. Until then, we have to put our focus on doing what we can to actually, reward the people that are doing the good work. And, that definitely is, channels like Nerd Wars, and this is the video that I was talking about right here. I've got my audio shut off, so should be able to actually pull this up, and, it'll just be playing in a little side screen. Let's see. We want to turn this on. Laptop. There we go. So yeah. So we're not going to hear anything. It's just going to be playing in the background. But this is definitely a video I would recommend looking at, because it has a lot of useful information in there. It is called Sweet Baby Inc. and the Weird Ghost Rabbit Hole, and this was today's Saturday Morning Buffoons. So much good information. It was, I think, supposed to be a 1-hour broadcast. It ended up going on for 3 hours. You'll see me basically living in the chat room, just going off like a madman, which is why I decided to do this video tonight, so that I could be a little bit more vocal and maybe composed, because I can be a little bit rough around the edges, and I can say some very harsh things. I will make sure that on these videos, though, I'll try to hold myself to a considerable standard. But I'm certainly not going to fall into the trap of trying to censor to the point that I don't feel like I'm expressing myself contextually and just putting out content for the sake of content. And that's what I would hope that any of us would want and would look for in the things that we are interested in seeing. That's actually the wrong one of these. Let's see. There we are. All right, let's make that a little bit smaller. All right, cool. So, if we actually want to get beyond the moment, as Kim Belair speaks of in this article that I'll be putting out, much like Nerd Wars, I'm working on doing a larger documentary to kind of explain this whole thing. It's going to take a couple weeks or a month or so to put together, but in the meantime, we have to keep the pressure on and do everything we can to, keep the focus where it's at. And that's on the industry being at odds with its audience. And we can sit here and say, oh, it's this bad actor or that bad actor. But when we do that, we're just going to be focusing on the sprinkles of the sundae. There's all this stuff, like Nerd Wars says in this stream that I've got going in the other window, he's calling Sweet Baby Inc. the cherry on the top of the sundae. And that's definitely like a good analogy, because, underneath them, behind them, is a company like Weird Ghosts. Weird Ghosts has a nonprofit organization wing that they're also invested in. So they have a whole bunch of different shell companies that will help them proliferate money and extend their influence outward. And so even if, say, Sweet Baby Inc. Weren't already, what it is based on its leadership, it might get that kind of direction from a business like Ghost Babies and Weird Ghosts. And those two companies being owned by the same people definitely, reinforces that corruption. And so, I'm trying to make sure that we actually see the entire thing for what it is, and we don't just focus on these little elements, because it is important to call out the elements. It's important to actually appreciate the fact that the Sweet Baby Inc. detected group was created, because through that, and as months ago, being just brought to frustration and to a point to where he went on his pronouns rant as it applies to Starfail, we'll keep having instances like that, and that's what I mean by like a herpes flare-up, and herpes is one of those things, even if you clean it up, you're going to carry it with you throughout the rest of your life. Even if it never flares up again, the possibility for it will be there. And that's the thing that we have to understand is if we don't put ourselves in alignment with companies that actually respect us, care for what we're doing as an audience, and appreciate us, and their artistic integrity, and actually giving us stories that are contextually filled, we're going to end up with nothing but a glut of meaningless content that might as well just be thrown in the trash, because it's all easily replaceable, and sooner or later, it's going to be a robot that will come in and take over and do the work in half the time. I mean, and to that, that's part of the reason why, I've got the picture here of my animated, Life is Sweeney, and I can't. When I generated this image that is on the screen, I couldn't use her name specifically, but I knew how to describe what it is that I'm doing, and a robot went and constructed this for me. I did 100 different mock-ups in less than a night's time, between a live stream that went on last night on the Badgercast, and who you should also like and subscribe, and go and catch his content, because he got brought into this by Nerd Wars, but Nerd Wars is leading the charge. He's our Aragorn in this whole situation. He's like like the guy who is going to see us through to the end, and is committed to actually doing this for the right reasons. We're all kind of like clowns to some degree, though, and I don't think any of us is going to necessarily be anybody's first choice if they just go based off of appearances or this or that, because we're imperfect. We're actual real people, but people with quality of character and a willingness to just be themselves are actually going to interact with you in a way that's authentic and legitimate. And so that's what you get when you go to, say, Nerd Wars channel, or if you go, right there's another one of the you're not seeing it right now, but that's where you can go and see hopefully some of the other artwork that I did last night on the Angry Badgers channel in coming broadcasts, because it's just fun, and it doesn't mean much of anything other than having a good time, and we can do these things with each other on a more local, decentralized level through the internet than still holding on to these archetype structures that have a big central moneymaker, at the center of it all. And right now, if these people can learn the lesson that we're not concerned about all their money, all their, fun, happy, whatever that it takes for them to create this delusional kind of situation, that's where we succeed. And that's where we can start to make things legitimately change. Because we have to get rid of institutions like Kotaku. We have to get rid of Polygon. We have to get rid of Eurogamer. And they're doing it to themselves by degrees. But it's not just getting rid of them. It's more about making them become irrelevant and falling to the wayside, because the focus is somewhere else where people are actually being serviced in a way that isn't, about service models. It's about service in the sense of, I want to do right by you. I want to show you care and compassion, and I want you to, in turn, reward me, because if I give you a place to have a good time, I'll probably get more tips. Like, say this is a bar room setting. You can get far more money in the long run if you don't try to nickel and dime everybody every step of the way. It cost me $5 to get in this place, and then it cost me like a surcharge on getting my bottle fee or whatever. Like, all these things, they add up, and ultimately, for what? A lot of it's the subterfuge. And so if you can just go and get quality media that's artistically driven from a contextual standpoint from people that don't have to pay the Sweet Baby Inks and the other consulting groups and have all these back channels of, seduction at play, well, then you can actually start to enjoy the things that you just want to enjoy again. And the people that make those things for you, will be benefited by word of mouth and people actually appreciating the capacity that people have to, do something good in this world. To kind of bring it back to Lord of the Rings. I mean, we can't lose our hope. We can't lose our focus. And, right now, like in the chat earlier today, I was kind of talking about Lord of the Rings again, as I often do. And, I wouldn't even necessarily say that we're at Helm's Deep. We're basically, we're just showing up at Rivendell, it feels like. Because the fellowship is coming together and we're all kind of having like this conversation about where do we go from here? What's the focus? And the focus in this instance is ultimately Mordor. We have to go after Sauron, whoever that is. I can't say completely right now because we're still, in the midst of doing all the investigation itself. And until we can actually get closer to the journey's end, we're not going to have a clear sight as to what that is. We have to get all the worm tongues, all the, Urus out of the way. We have to have our battle at Helm's Deep. We have to do these things. We can't just skip to the last chapter and say, oh, last week we took down the game industry. If we want to convince ourselves and believe it, then that will be what we come to believe. But, I would much rather kind of, to use another analogy, I'm not very religious, but I am very faith-based and spiritual based on my experience going through this world. And there was points in my life where I was completely at odds with faith and, legitimate values and this and that. And I, went after things that were more of that kind of darker path that would almost deny the thing that, dogmatic religions rely upon. And that is, an ever-present sense of this is the way that we do it. And with a righteous zeal, you just follow that through to its end without ever taking anything else into consideration. And that's not to say that, I'm going to sit here and dog on you for whatever your overall belief system is. But that is just kind of one of those things where I believe that fundamentally faith is the, head that all these silly hats of religion sit upon. And that includes the religion of dogmatic science that we've all been, kind of, I guess, crippled by to some degree over the course of the last few years, at least economically speaking. And, we've had a lot of our avenues of control for ourselves undermined and debased and taken out of our hands. And now they're being operated by these people who still want us to be beholden to them. Because, a lot of this is soft money, dark magic. And it plays out in a multitude of ways. And so if we're going to contend with this dark force, then we have to enlighten ourselves to understand that, you can't just get so hard-lined on these things. And that's why I say redemption would not be easy for these people. But much like Star Wars before Disney bought it and destroyed it, because Disney is a dark entity, and you can learn more about the dark side by the way that Disney handles it as a property, then you can get enjoyment out of watching what they did in their time and effort putting out Star Wars content. Because it certainly is not based on context. There's far more that you can see, in the darkness that is the control structure. And that's why I talk about the seductive element and how you have to think about who's the producer, who's the director, who's the person that is, funding it all. If we just go after actors or just, try to say one movie is like the ultimate this or that, then, we kind of start to become that thing. And so even though these people that we find are repugnant are, and they very much are, I would say that it is to our benefit to, take the time to, not lecture them and educate them like they try to do to us, but to just leave them out in the cold. Because they're scene chasers. They always want to be where we're at because what we're doing is the thing that's actually real and vital. They can have a whole bunch of empty banners and slogans and labels that mean absolutely nothing now because they were bought out by people who treat them like intellectual property rights holders, which is to say it's just an empty husk that I can fill in with whatever I feel is, beneficial for me to fill. And, at that point in time, we're just allowing them to do all this subterfuge, and we're focusing on the end level results. It's important to see that stuff for what it is and to not buy into it. But ultimately, we just have to, disconnect ourselves from the situation completely, or as much as possible. I mean, so one of the chat rooms earlier talking about how, everybody has an Amazon account or this or that. I have to shop at Walmart, because I'm in this little small town. They destroyed small businesses. And so, I go and I shop at a place that I necessarily don't want to support, but I really don't have the capacity to do anything beyond that. So at least within that framework, I have to make better choices. And that's part of the reason why I drink filtered water, because the water's been fluoridated. It's been filled with all these things that, I personally believe that a lot of our diet has been corrupted so that we're not able to think clearly and make better decisions. And the way that we've had our actual opportunities and options whittled down is also a way of reinforcing a concept of people being locked into that 2030 vision of you'll own nothing, you'll be happy. Because those will be your only options. You'll either own nothing and be happy, or you'll have your entire, not identity, but your livelihood shut off. You can identify however you choose, but that doesn't mean that the rest of the world has to agree with it. And I can call myself an avocado and think that I am all damn day. But most people are like, no, that dude's a problematic white guy. And clearly, just now, over the last few years, I grew to a point where I was like, I would rather accept that I am problematic, that I'm far from perfect. I'm not even trying to be. I work on improving myself and trying to, put my best foot forward and undo the damage that I may have brought in my life early on, or when I had my head in the clouds and was in this ideological, butt-sniffing echo chamber of, oh, well, we're the moral authority, when I was working at the doctor's office surrounded by, all the women, and I was just this one dude in the corner that's kind of like weird and strange to the rest of them. But they're caught up in like this weird, reaffirming system of toxic positivity. It's a cult of toxic positivity, because they just won't see their way out of, oh, everything's perfect, everything's this and that. Because if you don't fall into line with that, they kick you to the curb. They memory hole you. They cut you off. And they just keep on going down their diluted pathway with a big smile on their face, thinking that they somehow did you a favor by cutting you off and, throwing you out. And ultimately, they did. Because few people can say they were thrown out of a cult. But I was. I was the primary doctor who owned the business. I was her dispensary manager. And so I learned how to make tinctures. It's part of the reason why I talk about wizardry, because, I was paid to be a wizard. So, I would make people potent solutions, which is a healing potion. Thus, I'm a wizard. And I would make these things, but I wasn't necessarily the doctor. People would come to me and ask me, what do I do for this? And I'd like, you go upstairs and you talk to the doctor. Once you talk to the doctor and they diagnose what your situation is, then you come back to me and I can work with you. But if I just go and try to pull something out of my ass or out of the sky and say, oh, just do this, I could be right. But I could also be very wrong. Because when it comes to things like holistic medicine, you have to be patient to have patience. And, to treat the individual as an individual. That's why things like vaccines don't really work, because it's a top-down driven kind of thing. If you and I had the same affliction, we might not necessarily take the same amount of medication. We might not even take the same kinds of medication. Men and women are very different. Women are supposed to have more estrogen. Men are supposed to have more testosterone. And that's not to say one is better or worse than the other. We're just different. And if we learn to work in harmony and actually appreciate, we can make a better, more, successful world from positive reinforcement that isn't about this toxic positivity that doesn't allow for you to just have a bad day. Because part of the thing that we've lost in all this, over-technicalization of the world. Now everybody's so under the focus of a microscope that if you step out of line, people don't want to, have that, whatever it is that is being projected on you, projected onto them. And so that's the thing that creates this cancel culture and a lot of the censorship. But, to our benefit, we've been canceled and memory holed for the last 10 years to the point that they can't get rid of us. They absolutely need us to be a part of it. And so they keep trying to reinforce to us that we're shameful and we just need to change our ways and come around and then everything will be all right. But they're the ones who committed the offense to begin with. And so when we respond in kind, I'm one of those people where it's like, I believe in equality, which means fuck around and find out. And I know that sounds a little bit harsh, but I'm not going out and outwardly looking for problems. But if you bring them to my doorstep, I will defend myself. I believe in fairness and equality, and, that means equality. And so when this dark element comes into our sphere of, entertainment and just, the thing that gives us, quote unquote, the joy in our life that someone like Kim Bel-Air wants to taint and make everybody see her joy, she wants us all to be a part of her religion. I don't ascribe to her religion. I'm not part of that dogma. She can do that all damn day, and she can have her game company and do what that does, and it can go as far as it needs to. But for them to try to project it onto me that I have to be a part of that, when it's parallel to what I'm doing, but it's not exactly where I, am ultimately set to go on my destination, we're on a fork in the road. If they want to go over there, you can go the hell over there. And I'm going to stick to the right path, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to be with these people that accept me and appreciate me for the weird, strange internet squirrel that I am. And, that's the thing that ultimately I want us to be able to do is, be united as a fellowship of people that actually care enough for ourselves that we can care for each other. Because these people that are caught in their identity bubbles, they don't even care about themselves. They care about the thing that they represent. And that representation that they're talking about eliminates their quality of character, their quality of self. And so they become, in essence, these weird ghosts, these spectral apparitions. It's like the movie Face Off. Someone has hijacked them and put them in front of you because they need that person there to work as their agent, with their agency as their actor, to get across the line of bullshit that they're peddling. But the actor who is just doing this because they're beholden to a system that operates the agency, i.e., money, fame, power, this and that, that's what that leads to. And so we should get off that path. And we can't, I'm not trying to save them. I'm not even necessarily going to save myself in this life. All I can do is focus on making every day a little bit better, a little bit more open, a little bit more honest. And some days I'll have bad days. I'm not going to promise you that I'm somehow above reproach and you should look at me as a role model. No. In some ways, I'm a cautionary tale. I'm in my 40s. Thankfully, I like to think that I look a little bit younger than I actually am. But, at one point in time when I was working in the doctor's office, I had a very attractive young, mother that I worked with come in one day, and she looked at me and looked at a photo of me when I was 19, 20, and she's like, "Oh, you used to be a fuckboy." And in that instance, my entire life made sense around me because I never really thought about it in those terms. Because I didn't identify as a fuckboy, but it didn't matter how I identified. It's how the world saw me. It's how they didn't take me seriously, and this and that. And so that's what we need to do is flip the table, as it were, and change the script that we operate under. And so that companies like Sweet Baby Inc., even companies like Take-Two Interactive, like all this stuff, they have to learn that we are not beholden to them. If they're going to stay, on this dark path doing their dark magic like Saruman, then they're going to end up dead on a spike. I know that's not the way it was in the book, but I like the movies, and he played Dracula, so whatever. But they're going to end up, being impaled by the means of their own production, to use Kim's own weird, twisted. Actually, I guess it wasn't Kim. It was that was probably Eileen and her ilk, because that came from Weird Ghost. So, we want to make sure that we get our facts all straight. That's the other thing that we're putting out the videos today about, is kind of getting everybody refocused on not the actors, but the agencies that the actors represent and how they get their funding and all that kind of stuff. But we're coming up right on an hour, just a few seconds over. So I'm just going to go ahead and wrap it up because I thank you for taking the time to spend with me. I'm just kind of encapsulating what some of this stuff is. Hopefully you will all get to know me a little bit better in coming weeks ahead. I had a conversation with Nerd Wars earlier today about possibly doing some stuff on his live streams. And so more of that will come to light as we sort out the details. But I don't know that he'll necessarily still want me to be there after seeing me live stream and being here with me in the chat. But I like to think that he's a really good guy, and he can see that even though I can kind of get a little bit out there, I know when to reel it in and not go full reality based, I guess. But reality is harsh, and but everything is, and that's why we can't think that we can just smooth off all the edges, make the system perfect. Chasing after perfection turns us into the devil. But that'll be another one of my weird little rants at some point in time down the line in the future. But thank you again for sitting with me. If you saw this live, awesome. Please like and subscribe, do the things, whatever. I have no viewership or anything like that, so hopefully you find me by shout outs or just an interest in this whole Sweet Baby Inc. fiasco and the larger looming GamerGate 2 story that is coming into focus right now. But other than that, I would just say thank you again. You all have a wonderful week ahead. I hope you're all awesome as always, and safe travels as you go. And other than that, we will see you next time. Check you later.